Well, here we go then. We have finally reached the conclusion of the festive period in EFL, and today we are back with Matchday 26 Championship predictions as we look ahead to all 12 games on New Year's Day and give our scores and the reasons why. As always, I'll encourage you to do exactly the same, and if you beat or match my score, you will get a shout out in the next recap, which will be in about a week and a half as we finally get a little break for the FA Cup. Don't worry though, I'm sure we'll have a couple of manager specials between now and then, but today it is all about Matchday 26 on New Year's Day, and to go and look ahead to that, we've got to have a quick recap of what happened on Friday night in Matchday 25, where mercifully I returned to form with 12 points from the 12 games, 3 perfect scores, 3 other correct outcomes, and it could have been even better if it weren't for a few late goals. We've got perfect scores for Sheffield Wednesday's 1-0 at Preston, Rotherham's 1-0 against Sunderland, and West Brom's 1-0 home win against Leeds in a late kickoff. We also got correct outcomes for Southampton, Leicester and Hull's wins against their respective opponents. So 12 points overall, but how does that compare to you guys in the comment section? Well, this week, I'm pleased to report I'm back in form. I am the joint winner of Matchday 25, but one of you is up there level with me. Some really good efforts in the comments, a couple in double figures, 3 perfect scores for a couple of you too. But Peter is the one getting a shout out today, a regular player who also got 12 points. So well done to you for joining me at the top of the tree. So let's see how we all get on in Matchday 26. I've got a feeling the only way is down for me. And it certainly is with my first game and the prediction. There's a lot in this matchday that are a little bit 50-50. I know we got fooled by 1 or 2 bankers on Friday night, but this one's going to be tough. And we start with the early kickoff on TV. It is Mick Beale's Sunderland at home to Preston North End. Preston continue their woeful form in this second chunk of the season. Following that first 8 games, it has now been 17 matches with 13 points picked up. 13 from 51 is not a good return. And at home to Sheffield Wednesday, yet again, Preston created next to nothing. And even when Sheffield Wednesday went down to 10 at the end, yes, Preston had more of the ball. Yes, they probably had a chance to score in the game, but they certainly weren't dominant by any stretch. They can keep possession all they like, but they weren't creating many chances and not many good ones either. So a bit of a weird game for them. Again, struggling to dominate any opposition at this level. And for Sunderland, perhaps even more concerning really, because Rotherham have picked up points at home this season. There's no doubt in that. And they've not had a lot of the ball. Sunderland had nearly 70% of it. But it's the first game I can think of, certainly against a top half side or a playoff chaser, where Rotherham have had more of the shots and more of the shots on target, certainly had the best chances of the game. And while Sunderland came back into it after they fell behind, and of course Jack Clarke dug them out of a hole again, their performances have definitely taken a dip since Mick Beale's come in, and I'm not going to be deterred on that view. So for Rotherham it was unfortunate. For Sunderland, yes, it's a point, yes, it keeps them in the mix, but we're yet to see signs that Mick Beale has really got this side going, and that's going to be a worry with this game and then that big North East derby in the FA Cup next weekend. So very disappointing performance from both of these sides, and it makes it a very hard one to predict because Sunderland have only scored 3 goals in their last 5 matches. Preston drew a blank at home to Wednesday and will have to come here with the view of not being beaten. Sunderland will keep the ball, but will they be passive as Mick Beale's sides have been? I just think this is going to be a drab affair. I'm a bit surprised it's on TV, so I'm sure now it's going to be a thriller, but I'm going to stick my neck on the line, and I don't do this often in championship predictions. I'm beginning with a 0-0 draw between Sunderland and Preston, purely because if Jack Clarke doesn't come up with a moment of magic or there's a mistake from a set piece or something, I don't see where the inspiration comes from, so goalless draw to begin. Let's move on to 2 more sides who have not been in the best of form. It is Blackburn Rovers versus Rotherham United, and Rotherham, as we mentioned, an encouraging performance at home to Sunderland. A draw, but they forced a couple of good saves from Patterson, and it's the first game where they've had the bulk of the good chances in it, which you've got to say is a step forward. And after that win against Borough, which was very much a smash and grab, maybe the performance will be more pleasing than the result on this occasion. They go to a Blackburn side who have now lost 4 in a row. Albeit bar Huddersfield, they're against very decent opposition, and 3 of the 4 are away from home as well. Blackburn at home have not been too bad this season, albeit they don't draw games. And for Rotherham, we know away from home they're absolutely abysmal. It's whether or not they can find a result. And at this stage, they're starting to get to the stage where they have to, because Sheffield Wednesday picked up a win, QPR got a draw, Birmingham and Huddersfield, the two giving hope by dropping away. They've got to close that gap because they're 8 from safety. And if Huddersfield can get a result at the weekend, as unlikely as it is, Rotherham will start to be marooned. So I feel like they've got to try and scrap for a result here, but I just don't think they've got the threat on the road. So despite Blackburn's poor form, I'm going to go for them to edge it, but just by 2-1. Let's move on to two sides that were different in midweek, but two sides that picked up clean sheets. Bristol City versus Millwall. I made the mistake, didn't I? I fell into the trap. You all sucked me in last week. Oh, you've predicted Bristol City to lose again. We've changed now. And the worst 0-0 draw you will ever see at Birmingham. A side that are out of form. 1 shot on target for Birmingham, none for Bristol City. Kept the ball, had one great chance, but didn't create an awful lot. It was an absolutely drab game. Not a good advert for Championship football, and a missed chance for Bristol City against that opposition. For Millwall though, 3 clean sheets in a row and a crucial 1-0 win at home to Norwich. Not the most convincing again, it was a pretty even game. They gave up a lot of the ball, but they did create a couple of good chances, and while they'll be frustrated that they're now going to be without George Saville for this game because of his red card, but Millwall do win the game, and after the recent form, it was all great about coming in and changing the style of football for Joe Edwards, but ultimately, picking up a couple of ugly results is what was needed. It's now 4 unbeaten, 3 without conceding, and while they're not scoring freely, they're not free-flowing at all. They've just got to get to January and get clear, which they're doing. For this game again then, we're probably expecting a pretty low-scoring one. I'm going on the basis that prior to Birmingham away, Bristol City had been pretty convincing for 3. And I'll probably get some stick in the comments because now I'm predicting you to win and I'm the unlucky charm. I'm going to go for Bristol City to nick a pretty poor game by 1-0 at home to Millwall. Let's move up towards the top of the table because it's 4th place Leeds United against Birmingham City. Wayne Rooney under big pressure now, just 2 wins in 14 and has taken his side from 6th to 20th in a space of a couple of months. A 0-0 draw at home to Bristol City with 1 shot on target, and Bristol City still had the best chance of the game. Yes, it stops the rot of conceding 3 per match, but there's just no combination, is there? They can't be good going forward and good defensively in the same game. They're definitely going backwards from where they were, certainly at home under John Eustace, and they are now very much in danger with that relegation zone, particularly with QPR on Wednesday picking up regularly. For Leeds, a couple of tricky away defeats, the Preston one because of the red card, the West Brom game, it wasn't the most inspiring, let's be honest, but West Brom are that type of side. We knew it was going to be tricky for them. The big concern for Leeds is that bar that Ipswich game, they've not really been taking chances recently, and you just worry with the window approaching again. We saw the chaos it caused in August, and a few of those players that were considering or contemplating leaving there are still about. I wonder if we're going to see a bit of early work from Leeds in the window. Certainly a few players being linked with them. I saw David Brooks this week as well as one. So 2 sides that are in probably their worst form for a little while. And on paper, you would probably think this is going to be a close game, but we've watched Birmingham defend against sides who have got pace on the counter. We saw what they did against Leicester and against Plymouth. And Leeds, in terms of that style of attack, are probably the best version of that in the league. So I'm going to go for Leeds to win this heavily. I'm not convinced by them at the back either. So I'm going to go for a bit of a bonkers thriller in this one. I'm going to go for Leeds to beat Birmingham by 4-2. Let's move on to another game that on paper is a routine home win. It is leaders Leicester City against struggling Huddersfield Town. Huddersfield defeated 2-1 at home to Middlesbrough. The late Johnny Howson goal stinging their tail, but to be honest, Borough had a contender for miss of the season prior. Huddersfield played well, they were in the game. They're certainly putting a better performance than we've seen recently, but he didn't take a couple of their chances, and in the end, just about pegged off. But if you go to the start of the season, on paper, Borough are a better side. For Leicester, they continue to run on. A draw against Ipswich, but back to winning ways at Cardiff. James Justin and Kiernan Dewsbury Hall, 2 former Luton boys getting the goals, and James Justin's was an absolute stunner, so well done to him. Leicester are going to win it. There is no doubt based on what we're seeing elsewhere. I mean, Southampton were fortunate to win, given an offside decision, and the other 2 up there dropped points, so it's Leicester's to lose now, and I don't think they will. Fair play to Maresca, who learned in a way I didn't think he would from the Palmer job. This is a comprehensive home win for me. I'm going Leicester by 3-0. Next up is a much trickier one to predict as we head to the Riverside for Middlesbrough v Coventry. Borough, as we mentioned, just about beat Huddersfield, but they tried their best not to take chances. In the end, though, 3 big points up to 9th and just 3 points off the playoffs. They are finally starting to progress, and I still think they'll make that top 6 if they get one attacking reinforcement in January. We saw it last year with Cameron Archer. Can they find their equivalent this year? I'm sure they will. For Coventry, a frustrating day against Swansea, a 93rd minute equaliser, ruining another perfect score for me. But they dominated the game. They're starting to look good in front of goal. And while the hoodoo against Swansea continues, I've got no worries about Coventry now. They're going to be right up in that playoff mix. They're going to pick up points. And this, of course, a repeat of that playoff semi-final they were expected to lose. We saw them frustrate Middlesbrough that day in the away leg and nick it 1-0. There's maybe not quite the same attacking quality in the Coventry side, but defensively they're pretty similar. So I'm going to go for a Championship's favourite scoreline here. I think they'll cancel each other out. And maybe going into this, Coventry have the psychological edge purely because of last year. So 1-1 for me. Another game that might be close is Norwich City versus Southampton. Norwich have been a bit of a mixed bag recently with a couple of 1-0 away defeats, but prior, a couple of good home wins against poorer sides in the division. For Southampton, the unbeaten run continues. 17, I think it is now. And you've got to give Russell Martin credit for the way that they're dominating games and they've improved defensively. A little sign of the reoccurring problems at the end of the Plymouth game. Gavin Bazunu with a bit of a howler to allow Ryan Hardy a consolation. But you've got to say, despite the stats and the dominance from Southampton and some of the missed chances, they were fortunate in the end because while the first goal from Alcaraz was a lovely finish just 15 seconds or so earlier, Plymouth had put the ball in the back of the net with a perfectly legitimate goal. You even had the lines to assist you with the offside there, and unfortunately the wrong decision was made. And on another day, if they'd got 1-0 down there and Plymouth could have put 10 behind the ball, we could have seen a very different outcome. As it was, Southampton then caught them out while they were complaining to the referee, ran up the pitch and scored. And fair play, they took advantage of the situation. They deserved to win over the course of the 90 minutes without doubt. But there's still a bit of fortune there, because if they'd gone 1-0 down, that could have been a very tricky finish to the game. For this one, though, with Norwich, a bit of a mixed bag at the minute, but I still think there's something in that side. I'm going to go, again, for a draw in this one. I was thinking of going a bit higher, but Southampton don't concede many these days. So I'm going to sit on the fence with the Championship's favourite scoreline. Southampton get offered chances on the counter, they'll win comfortably. But Norwich have tightened up a little bit, so I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw. Off to the side who were unfortunate against Southampton, it is Plymouth Argyle versus Watford. Plymouth, we mentioned, were completely outclassed by the Saints, and they could have been a couple down at half-time. Their goalkeeper was excellent. But ultimately, they scored a legitimate goal that was ruled out and conceded 15 seconds later from the resulting free kick at the other end. Now, yes, there's plenty of time to get back in your shape, and yes, Alcaraz shouldn't have had so much time on the edge, but you've got to say it's unfortunate because it was a perfectly good goal that Barley Member scored. And even watching it live, we were sitting there and went, oh, I'm not sure that's offside, you know. And unfortunately, it's probably cost Plymouth at least a point there. If we have a look at their recent form, though, they are scoring goals, and that is something that's often a worry for teams coming up. They've got 40 in the division already, and at home, we know they're a very strong prospect. Watford drew 1-0 against Stoke, which, mild relief, I guess, after that 4-1 defeat in the previous game. Again, a red card, again, a lack of discipline. But they did do okay, and it was an even game in the end. I don't think you could argue with the scoreline. And Watford did okay, considering they were down to 10, to not then fall apart. So, very difficult one to predict this. And you don't really want to back Plymouth to lose at home, because it very rarely happens. They do concede, and they do score goals. Watford have been a bit more gutsy this year. The Bristol City game aside, they've come back from behind at times. They've stayed in games. They've fought with 10 men. So I'm going to go for a draw in this one, but I'm not going to go 1-0 for the third time in a row. I'm going to go for goals galore, 2 apiece at home park. Let's get on to a big game for QPR against Cardiff. 22nd place and a creditable draw away at Ipswich, you've got to say. Albeit the hosts were absolutely abysmal by their usual standards and only really created one great opening. QPR were in that game. They had more shots, they had a few efforts from distance, and they created a few chances out wide with corners and that as well. It was a good display tactically from Rangers, but they've got to start picking up wins soon. Yes, it stopped the rot of 3 successive defeats, but it's no win in 5, only 1 goal scored in that time. despite the fact they've played Plymouth, Sheffield Wednesday and Millwall, who are all in that bottom third. And you have to say, arguably, their best performances have come against the bigger sides, so the Ipswich and Southampton games where they've looked really resolute. For Cardiff, a 2-0 defeat against Leicester, routine and an absolute stunner for the second goal. It was a pretty even game other than that, but Cardiff didn't create anything clear-cut, and it has been a problem in recent weeks. They've been in and out of form in front of goal, and they've beaten a couple of the sides that they should have and picked up odd points. When they've played against those top sides, Hull away, Leicester at home, they have struggled a little bit. So for this game, I think it's going to be really cagey. If I was going with my head, I would say 1-0 Cardiff, because that's arguably what the score would be. It's one of those ones I've got a funny feeling about. I put down the score I expected, which was 1-0 Cardiff, and I wasn't happy with it. I've got a feeling we're going to see a QPR win here, just because Huddersfield are only 4 away, Birmingham are on the slide. Is a real opportunity to go into January with hope, and I feel QPR are going to do it. I think it's going to be an ugly game. I think both sides are going to be uninspiring. I'm going to go from a set piece or something like that, a deflection, QPR to nick an ugly 1-0 win. Might be wrong, and if it's 1-0 Cardiff, I'll be tearing my hair out in the next episode. 3 to go as we move on to Stoke City versus Ipswich. The unbeaten start continues for Steven Schumacher, albeit frustration at another draw. A 1-1 at Watford, despite playing against 10 men for most of the second half, might have actually been a problem for a side without much confidence, not having that space to counter to get in behind. But it's a decent start. 5 points. They are now 7 clear of that relegation zone. They've overtaken Birmingham as well. But they need to pick up more points. And for Ipswich at the moment, it's probably not a better time to face them. They're just 3 clear of Southampton. They haven't won in 4. Yes, they've played Leeds, Leicester and a derby against Norwich. But a home to QPR, you would call a proper slip-up, because it wasn't the fact that they were frustrated. You can have those games where you have 20 shots and it just doesn't go in. Against QPR, they didn't create that much. They probably had 1 golden chance, but otherwise it was a fairly mediocre display and a fairly comfortable one for the visitors. So Stoke have got an opportunity here, and I do feel like Schumacher is picking up a little bit of momentum. Feels a dangerous thing to say given how inconsistent Stoke have been for many years under many managers. But given that Stoke have drawn 4 of their last 5, Ipswich have drawn 3 of their last 4, I'm going to sit on the fence again with the Championship's favourite scoreline. For the 3rd time in 5 games, I'm going 1 goal apiece. 2 to go as we move on to Swansea City versus West Brom. Another very Carlos Corberán performance against Leeds from his side. A 1-0 win. They're up to 5th. They're just 3 points behind Leeds now. They're having a really good season. And as we said, they're going to make the playoffs, no doubt about it. For Swansea, a good 2-2 draw at Coventry. A good late fight back after that humiliation at Southampton. You've got to give credit to Alan Sheehan. He's done his bit. In the, 6 games now where they've been managerless, 2 wins and 2 draws, 8 points. And the only games they've lost are Southampton and Borough, who are 2 sides you probably expect to be in and around the top 6. So a fairly solid effort from them. I would expect it to be the last game before they appoint a manager. But West Brom at the moment, they're just so solid. Again, you look at the games they've lost by the odd goal at Borough and Sunderland, but generally, they've really done well when they're either at home or away to bottom half sides. And they're just that ruthless, really mean defensive team. Even that game, Carl Bartley came out and their record without him is awful, but they still managed to get the clean sheet. I think West Brom are going to be really strong this year, and they might even end up being a team to avoid in that playoff. I'm going to go for them to win away from home at Swansea. I don't think it's going to be pretty. I'm going 1-0 yet again. Might be 2 on the counter late on. I'm not going for a Charlie Bet special today. On to the final game, the late one on TV. It is Sheffield Wednesday versus Hull City. What an important win for Wednesday. Keeps them in the mix going to January. A late red card again, frustrating, but you've got to give big credit because Sheffield Wednesday are in the mix, which nobody thought when Xisco was sacked. They were so far adrift, they didn't look like winning. And now it's not just that. They've picked up draws, they've picked up points. The goal difference hasn't got any worse, not really improving that much. And while it wasn't a great game against Preston, you knew they weren't going to create much. You knew they weren't, even at home to the bottom sides, going to come out and push too much. So I feel like it's a really important one for them. To get that 1-0, to hang on at the end with 10 men will be a real confidence boost. And now January's come, Danny Roll can add 2 or 3 of his own type of players, which I feel will give the team a bit more energy and certainly push them on. Probably going to have to let a few go to make that happen, but I think it's a necessity at this point. And now they've got a chance, they might invest a little tiny bit, if nothing else. For Hull, a really good late win against Blackburn by 3-2. Again, not the best defensively from 2-0 up, but they got the lead again at 3-2, then kept it against 10 men. And to be fair, they were the better side in that game. Gave up possession, but looked a real threat on the counter. They're exciting to watch going forward. They created a couple of good chances. They took opportunities. And you know what? I say it every week. Liam Rossini is doing such a good job. While Hull are improving, while they've signed some good players this year, I don't think on paper they've got a top 6 team. And he's certainly pushing them there at the moment, albeit with a couple of others catching quickly. So both sides bounced back after back-to-back defeats. But Hull generally this season have been really strong. Away from home, they've been one of the better teams in the division. On Wednesday, I've actually probably had better success on the road with Danny Rowe in recent times. Those 1-0 wins have been coming. They did win at home to QPR. They somehow threw the Cardiff game away. When they've played the top teams at home, it's been a little bit trickier. So based on that, I am going to go for a Hull City win. I think it will be narrow. I could have gone 1-0 again, but I didn't want too many. I'm going to go for Hull City to nick the final game of the day by 2-1 at Sheffield Wednesday. So with all that out of the way, let's have a quick recap of what we've gone for in matchday 26. The big goals are coming at Ellen Road in my view. I've gone for a 4-2 Leeds United win against Birmingham City. I've also gone for leaders Leicester to keep up the pace with a 3-0 at home to Huddersfield. We've got a big ugly win for QPR, which I may regret if Cardiff go and nick that one. And Ipswich to drop points again, as well as Southampton, with me predicting both to get a 1-1 draw away from home. But those are just my predictions for matchday 26, the New Year's Day edition in a championship. Do you agree or disagree? Let me know in the comments below and give me your predictions for all of the matchday's action. If you beat or match my score, you'll get a shout out in the next recap, which will be in about a week and a half, looking ahead to the matchday after the FA Cup third round. Between now and then, no, don't worry. We're awaiting manager specials from both Plymouth, Argyle and Swansea, which will be on the channel imminently. We've also got a preview of AFCON, a tournament we always look forward to every couple of years, and there'll be a little bit more on the channel as well. If you missed them yesterday, we've got our Premier League predictions up in the eye above, which you can see for the rest of the weekend's action. But a happy new year to all of you. Thank you so much for your support in 2023. Enjoy the New Year's Day football. Enjoy the return of the FA Cup on the first weekend of January. We'll see you back here in a couple of weeks for matchday 27.